Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and welcome to Omni at the Movies, a series I haven't really done since Godzilla King of the Monsters was released, because I haven't really been to the theater all that often. But recently I had a chance to see a movie, and I figured may as well share my thoughts on it, even if I am a little bit late in getting my thoughts out there. That film is Ford v Ferrari. Now I know that's not the typical sort of film I review on this channel. I'm more typically known for kaiju movies and sci-fi and animation and things like that. A historical drama about cars doesn't really seem like the sort of thing I would normally do. I'll be perfectly honest with you, my knowledge of cars begins and ends with Hot Wheels. But I had the opportunity to see this film and I figured I'd share my thoughts on it. Maybe you've already seen it, considering it's getting a lot of good press, but on the off chance that you haven't gotten the opportunity, I will tell you this. It is definitely worth seeing. Ford v Ferrari has a lot of racing in it, and appropriately enough, the movie itself is comparable to a race. It is incredibly long. I think the movie started at 7 and we got out at 9:45. So it's not a short film, it's a commitment to sit through, but it moves along at such a brisk pace that you barely even notice it. That I always have said is a sign of a good film, when it can be really long but you don't care. You're not sitting there squirming in your seat or looking at your watch. You're focused on it the whole time because you want to see what happens next. That means you've made a really good film, and Ford v Ferrari manages to do that. And of course, many different factors contribute to this, particularly the chemistry between our two leads, Christian Bale as Ken Miles and Matt Damon as Carroll Shelby, the two real figures who were behind the story that this film is based on, how Ford managed to build a race car that beat the reigning race champions, Ferrari. This is the first time they've ever worked together, though in interviews they've said their careers have woven in between each other because it seems like whenever one of them is up for a particular role they don't take, they go to the other guy. So this is a first for both of them being together, and they work really well off of each other. I'm kind of surprised they haven't done a movie before, and depending on how this goes, I would certainly like to see them do more afterward because they really bounce off each other quite well. Yes, they are playing historical figures, but that alone does not make chemistry. Chemistry is something that two actors just need to have in order for the performances to work. And boy, do they have chemistry. You really do believe that these two are friends. Friends who don't always get along and are often prone to fighting with each other, verbally and sometimes physically, but still friends who get along and ultimately, when the chips are down, have the same goal and know how to play off each other. And that, since it's what the film is really built on, that is what really makes it. Not to sell any of the other performances short, mind you, but the movie is ultimately about Miles and Shelby. And when you get right down to it, it's those two performances that need to be at the top. If they don't work, the whole movie falls apart. And thankfully, they both work. You wind up feeling like these two are genuine, and they really are good friends, and you're rooting for both of them the whole way through. There's also the style of the film, which feels like a movie that was made in the period it's set in. It's got that sort of old-fashioned sense to it. From the cinematography, to the performances, to the writing style itself, even to a certain extent the music. Though I will say, since I brought it up, the soundtrack is kind of forgettable for me. It's one of those modern soundtracks that has a hook but doesn't really have a melody, so it comes off more as ambient. So that's unfortunate, but hey, no movie is perfect. But getting back to the original topic, Ford v Ferrari really does feel like an old-fashioned kind of film. The kind of movies that they don't really make anymore. Maybe they play them on the classic movie channels, or you can find them on Netflix if you're really lucky. But for the most part, they are of a bygone age. Ford v Ferrari feels like a revival of that, including its conclusion. Now, I don't want to get into spoilers, though considering its actual history, it probably wouldn't be a spoiler if you already know the story. Just to be safe, though, I'll still avoid spoilers. But I will say that even though the film doesn't really have what I would call a happy ending, it is nevertheless an uplifting film. You know how with a lot of modern dramas, be they historical or fictional, there's always this sense, or at least it feels like it's always there, that you're supposed to walk out of the movie feeling depressed. It like bashes you over the head with, "This is sad! You should feel sad! And depending on what the subject matter is, feel guilty too! You are not supposed to feel good here!" Well, that's not the case with Ford v Ferrari. Even though, like I said, it doesn't really have a happy ending, it's nevertheless uplifting. There's positivity. It's very glass half full without coming across as a sappy sort of unrealistic optimism. And that's actually quite refreshing in this day and age. If I had to summarize the message of Ford v Ferrari, I would say it boils down to sometimes life gets you down. You can do your absolute best at the thing you're most talented at, but something beyond your control could still snatch total victory away from you. If that happens, acknowledge that it sucks, pick yourself back up, and go on to the next thing. Because there's always the next thing. Just because things didn't quite work out for you here, doesn't mean you have to completely give up. And that's a very positive message to put forward. Especially in this day and age, I think. Is it a perfect movie? Of course not. No movie is truly perfect. Like I said earlier, the soundtrack is largely forgettable, at least for me. And I'm sure that certain individuals were altered slightly to be more villainous or more virtuous than they actually were in history, which is the case with practically every historical drama that's ever made. But in this particular case, I will say it doesn't feel necessarily overt. It's not like they took a character and twisted him into a villain so they could have a mustache-twirling antagonist. They didn't do that. There are characters who are clearly making decisions that benefit them more than it benefits our protagonists, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are villains, which that is at least one pitfall of historical dramas that Ford v Ferrari manages to dodge. So there you have it. If you haven't seen Ford v Ferrari yet, carve out a particular evening where you haven't got anything else to do and go check it out. It's definitely worth seeing. All those positive reviews you may have heard, I totally agree with them. Even if you're not all that interested in cars or racing or things like that, I would still recommend that you see it for the message. Because the message is something that a lot of people could stand to hear, especially if they're going through some rough times. So, those are my thoughts. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer, signing off.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.